Some wounds in a marriage run so deep that even the bright lights of a game show cannot hide them. When 51-year-old Angela Torres stood on the Family Feud stage in December 2024, she was carrying 15 years of resentment, hurt, and blame toward her husband, Marcus. What started as a normal game show taping turned into a raw confrontation about infidelity, broken trust, and whether a marriage destroyed by betrayal could ever be rebuilt. The moment Angela publicly blamed Marcus for ruining their marriage, Steve Harvey found himself stepping between two people whose pain was so visible that continuing the game seemed impossible. Before you witness this powerful moment of truth and the wisdom Steve Harvey shared about forgiveness, accountability, and moving forward, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about second chances in marriage. The Family Feud studio felt different that afternoon in ways the production crew could not quite explain. The Torres family from Phoenix, Arizona, stood ready to compete against the Patterson family from Florida. But there was a tension in the Torres family that was obvious to anyone paying attention. Angela Torres stood on one end of her family group, while her husband Marcus stood on the other, with their 3 adult children positioned uncomfortably between them. The physical distance between husband and wife spoke volumes before a single word was exchanged. Angela Torres had spent the last 3 years of her life trying to answer an impossible question. Could she forgive her husband for destroying their marriage? At 51 years old, she had invested 25 years in a relationship that she had believed was built on trust, partnership, and mutual commitment. She worked as a high school counselor, helping teenagers navigate the complicated emotions of adolescence and young adulthood. Her job required her to be patient, understanding, and skilled at helping people work through difficult feelings. But when it came to her own marriage, all that professional wisdom seemed useless. 3 years ago, Angela had discovered that Marcus had been having an affair with a coworker. The affair had lasted for 8 months before Angela found text messages on Marcus's phone that revealed everything. The discovery had shattered Angela's world completely. The man she had trusted for over 2 decades, the father of her 3 children, the person she had built an entire life with, had betrayed her in the most fundamental way possible. The affair had ended immediately when Angela confronted Marcus. He had begged for forgiveness, promised it would never happen again, and committed to doing whatever was necessary to save their marriage. Their pastor had recommended counseling, and Marcus had agreed without hesitation. They had spent the last 3 years in therapy, working through the betrayal, trying to rebuild trust, and attempting to salvage something from the wreckage of what their marriage had been. But Angela had never truly forgiven him. She had stayed in the marriage for their children, for financial stability, and because divorce felt like admitting failure after 25 years together. She had gone through the motions of reconciliation without ever truly reconciling in her heart. The resentment had grown rather than diminished over time. Every argument, every disappointment, every moment of frustration in their marriage got traced back to Marcus's affair. Angela blamed him not just for the infidelity itself, but for ruining what they had built together and taking away her ability to trust him or anyone else completely. Marcus Torres, also 51, worked as an architect. He had made a terrible mistake 3 years ago, one that he regretted every single day. The affair had been a symptom of deeper problems in their marriage that he had not known how to address. He had felt disconnected from Angela, unappreciated in his work and home life, and had made the catastrophic decision to seek validation from someone else instead of communicating honestly with his wife about what he was feeling. When Angela discovered the affair, Marcus had been genuinely devastated by the pain he had caused. He had ended the relationship immediately, changed jobs to remove himself from proximity to the other woman, and committed fully to marriage counseling. He had been transparent about his whereabouts, his communications, and his feelings. He had done everything their therapist suggested and more, but nothing seemed to be enough. Angela's anger had not softened with time. If anything, it had intensified. Their 3 children, Isabella, 24, Miguel, 22, and Sophia, 19, had been caught in the middle of their parents' troubled marriage for 3 years. They loved both parents and understood that their father had made a serious mistake, but also saw that their mother's inability to forgive was creating ongoing toxicity in the household. The children had experienced their own therapy to process the impact of their father's infidelity and their parents' subsequent struggling marriage. The opportunity to appear on Family Feud had come through Miguel, who had applied hoping that doing something fun together as a family might help ease some of the constant tension at home. The children had convinced both parents to participate, presenting it as a chance to create a positive family memory. Angela had reluctantly agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to show the world that they were still a family, even if the reality behind closed doors was much more complicated. What none of them had anticipated was that the stress of being on television, the competitive nature of the game, and the forced proximity would bring all the unresolved issues right to the surface in the most public way imaginable. The game began with noticeable awkwardness in the tour's family dynamics. Steve Harvey, with his years of experience reading families, immediately picked up on the strange energy between Angela and Marcus. When introducing the family, he asked them how long they had been married. Angela had answered, 25 years, in a tone that suggested the number was more burden than blessing. Steve had raised an eyebrow but moved forward with the game. The first few rounds went reasonably well, though careful observers noticed that Angela and Marcus never celebrated together when their family scored points. While the rest of the family would high-five and hug, Angela and Marcus would remain separate, acknowledging success with small nods but never physical contact or shared joy. Then came the question that would crack everything open. Steve Harvey asked, "Name something married couples argue about most." It was Marcus's turn at the buzzer. He buzzed in and answered, "Money." The answer was on the board. It was the number one answer with 38 points. The family celebrated and Marcus looked pleased with himself. But as he returned to his spot, Angela said loudly enough for the microphones to catch, "Well, you would know all about causing arguments in marriage, wouldn't you?" Marcus's expression tightened, but he did not respond. Their children exchanged worried glances. Steve Harvey, who had been moving toward the board, paused and looked back at the tour's family with concern. The game continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Angela's comment hung in the air like a dark cloud. 2 rounds later, another question triggered everything. Steve asked, "Name something people do that shows they don't trust someone." It was Angela's turn to answer. He stepped to the buzzer with an expression that was hard to read. When Steve repeated the question, Angela's answer was bitter and pointed. "Check their phone," she said, looking directly at Marcus. The answer was on the board, the number 2 answer with 26 points, but nobody was celebrating. Angela continued speaking, even though the question had been answered. "Because when you've been lied to for months, when you've been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, you never feel safe again. You check phones. You question everything. You live with constant doubt because your trust was destroyed." The studio audience went completely silent. This was not game show banter. This was raw, unfiltered pain being expressed on live television. Marcus stood frozen, his face showing a mixture of shame, frustration, and exhaustion. Steve Harvey made an immediate decision. He signaled to the production crew to stop taping. He walked away from the game board and positioned himself physically between Angela and Marcus, creating a barrier and a safe space for what clearly needed to happen. "Okay, we need to stop right here," Steve said firmly, "because what's happening right now is bigger than this game. Angela, Marcus, I need you both to come talk to me." The tour's children looked relieved that someone was finally addressing what had been obvious to everyone. Angela and Marcus moved towards Steve, maintaining careful distance from each other. Steve Harvey looked at both of them with an expression that combined compassion and concern. "How long has it been since whatever happened between you two?" he asked gently. 3 years, Angela said, her voice tight with emotion. 3 years since I found out my husband was having an affair. 3 years since he destroyed our marriage and broke every promise he ever made to me." The audience gasped. Marcus closed his eyes, clearly pained by hearing this aired so publicly. Their children stood together, holding each other for support as their family's deepest wound was exposed. "And Marcus," Steve said, turning to him, "is what she's saying true? Did you have an affair?" Marcus nodded, his voice barely audible. "Yes, 3 years ago. It lasted 8 months. It was the biggest mistake of my life." Steve nodded slowly, processing this information. "And what have you done since then?" "Everything," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "I ended it immediately when Angela found out. I changed jobs. We went to counseling. I've been completely transparent about everything for 3 years. I've apologized 1,000 times. I've tried everything I know how to do to make things right, but nothing is ever enough. Every single day for 3 years, I've been reminded of my mistake. Every argument leads back to the affair. Every problem in our marriage is my fault because I'm the one who ruined everything." His voice broke slightly on the last words, revealing the exhaustion of carrying guilt and blame for 3 years without relief or forgiveness. Steve turned to Angela. "And you, ma'am, have you forgiven him?" Angela's response was immediate and sharp. "How am I supposed to forgive someone who destroyed 22 years of trust in 8 months? How am I supposed to forget that while I was home taking care of our children and our household, he was with another woman? How am I supposed to trust anything he says when he lied to my face for months?" I'm not asking if you forgot, Steve said gently. I'm asking if you've forgiven him. Angela's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to, she admitted. I've tried, God knows I've tried, but every time I look at him, all I see is the betrayal. All I feel is the pain of that discovery. I can't get past it. Steve Harvey took a deep breath. What he said next would become one of the most powerful moments in Family Feud history. Let me tell you something about forgiveness that took me years to understand. Forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you. It's about you. It's about releasing yourself from the prison of anger and resentment. Because right now, Angela, you're the one suffering. You're the one carrying this pain every single day. Marcus made a terrible choice 3 years ago. But you're making a choice every single day to hold on to that pain instead of releasing it. Angela started to protest, but Steve gently raised his hand. I'm not saying what he did was okay. It wasn't. Infidelity is a betrayal of the deepest trust. But I am saying that if you've decided to stay in this marriage, if you've spent 3 years in counseling trying to work through this, then at some point, you have to make a real choice. Either you forgive him and truly work toward rebuilding your marriage, or you acknowledge that you can't forgive him and you let him go. What you cannot do is stay married while punishing him forever. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Steve continued, because what you're doing right now isn't a marriage. It's a prison sentence for both of you. He's living under constant guilt and blame, never able to move past his mistake no matter how much work he does. And you're living in constant pain and anger, unable to heal because you won't let go of the wound. Angela was crying openly now, but he deserves to feel guilty. He's the one who did this to us. You're absolutely right, Steve agreed. He does bear responsibility for breaking the trust in your marriage. But Angela, let me ask you something. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Do you want to hold on to your justified anger for the rest of your life, or do you want to heal and move forward? He turned to Marcus. And you, brother, I need to ask you something too. Have you truly forgiven yourself for what you did? Marcus looked startled by the question. I don't know if I deserve to forgive myself. That's the problem, Steve said. You're both stuck. Angela won't forgive you and you won't forgive yourself. So you're both just living in this constant state of guilt and resentment, going through the motions of a marriage without any of the joy or partnership that makes marriage worth it. Steve positioned himself directly between them, looking at each one in turn. Here's what I know about marriage after being married 3 times and finally getting it right. Marriage requires 2 things above everything else. First, it requires the ability to forgive real mistakes and move forward. And second, it requires the wisdom to know when a marriage is truly over and to have the courage to let go. He addressed Angela directly. You have every right to be hurt by what Marcus did, every right to be angry, every right to decide you cannot forgive him and to end this marriage. But what you don't have the right to do is stay married to him while treating him like he's still cheating on you every single day. That's not fair to him, it's not fair to you, and it's definitely not fair to your children who have to live in a home filled with resentment and blame. Angela's daughter Isabella spoke up from where the children stood. Mom, he's right. Dad made a terrible mistake. We all know that. But you've been punishing him for 3 years. We can't even have a normal family dinner without you bringing up the affair. Every holiday is tense because you won't let it go. We love you, but this isn't healthy for anyone anymore. The words from her own daughter seemed to hit Angela harder than anything else. She looked at her 3 children, seeing the pain and exhaustion on their faces, and seemed to truly understand for the first time how her inability to forgive was affecting everyone in the family, not just Marcus. Steve turned to Marcus. And you need to understand something too. You cannot spend the rest of your life apologizing. You made a mistake. You've done the work to try to make amends. But at some point, if Angela cannot forgive you, you need to release yourself from this constant guilt and move on with your life, even if that means moving on without her. Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. I just want my wife back. I want the woman I married, the partnership we used to have. I know I destroyed that, but I've tried so hard to rebuild it. I don't know what else to do. Steve's response was gentle but firm. Sometimes, brother, you can't rebuild what was broken. Sometimes you have to accept that your actions had permanent consequences. That doesn't mean you're a terrible person forever. It means you made a choice that changed everything, and now you have to live with those changes. He turned back to address both of them. So here's what I'm going to tell you both. You need to make a real decision. Not tomorrow, not next week, but soon. Angela, you need to decide if you can truly forgive Marcus and commit to rebuilding your marriage without constantly bringing up the past. If you can, then you need to do the hard work of actually letting go and moving forward. If you can't, then you need to be honest about that and end the marriage so you both can move on and find peace. Steve continued. And Marcus, you need to accept that you cannot force Angela to forgive you. You can apologize, you can do all the right things, you can be the perfect husband from this day forward, and she still might not be able to get past what you did. And if that's the case, you need to release yourself from this constant guilt and recognize that some mistakes have consequences that last forever. The production crew, the audience, and the Torres family all stood in silence as Steve's words sank in. This had become something much more significant than a game show moment. This was real therapy, real truth, and real consequences playing out in front of everyone. After several minutes of silence, Angela spoke. Her voice was different now, softer and more vulnerable than the bitter tone she had used earlier. "I'm so tired," she said. "I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of hurting. I'm tired of checking his phone and questioning everything he says. I'm tired of living in the past, but I don't know how to stop." Steve's expression softened with compassion. "That's the most honest thing you've said today, and that's where healing begins. When you acknowledge that you're tired of carrying the pain and you want to put it down, that's the first step toward forgiveness." He turned to the production staff. "We're not finishing this game today. This family needs time to process what just happened, and they need professional help beyond what I can give them in a game show studio." Steve then did something unprecedented. He arranged for the Torres family to have access to intensive marriage counseling with one of the top relationship therapists in the country, someone who specialized in helping couples navigate the aftermath of infidelity. He also connected them with a family therapist who could help their children process the ongoing impact of their parents' troubled marriage. The episode that aired 8 weeks later was edited carefully. The raw confrontation was shown, but in a way that respected the Torres family's privacy while still conveying the powerful message about forgiveness, accountability, and the difficult choices that come with betrayal in marriage. The episode included a note explaining that the family had decided not to complete the game and were seeking intensive counseling. The response to the episode was extraordinary. Millions of viewers saw themselves in Angela and Marcus. The comment sections and social media were filled with people sharing their own stories of infidelity, betrayal, and the complicated journey of deciding whether to forgive or leave. Some viewers sided with Angela, arguing that 3 years was not enough time to heal from such a fundamental betrayal, and that she had every right to her anger. Others sided with Marcus, suggesting that he had done everything right since the affair and deserved the chance to move past his mistake. Most viewers, however, recognized that the situation was complex and that there were no easy answers. 3 months after the episode aired, the Torres family released a statement. Angela and Marcus had completed an intensive month-long marriage counseling program. During that program, they had come to a difficult decision. They were separating with the intention of eventually divorcing. Angela had realized through therapy that she could not forgive Marcus, and continuing to try was causing more harm than good to everyone involved. Marcus had accepted this decision and had committed to co-parenting their adult children in a healthy way. The statement emphasized that the decision was mutual and peaceful. Both Angela and Marcus acknowledged that staying together was hurting them both and preventing either of them from moving forward with their lives. They thanked Steve Harvey for forcing them to confront the truth they had been avoiding for 3 years. 6 months after the episode aired, Angela did an interview where she spoke candidly about her journey. She explained that Steve Harvey's question about whether she wanted to be right or happy had haunted her for weeks. She had realized that she had been so focused on making sure Marcus understood the depth of his betrayal that she had lost sight of her own well-being and happiness. Angela shared that the separation had been painful but also liberating. She was working with a therapist on her own healing, learning to trust again, and rediscovering who she was outside of being Marcus's wife and the victim of his betrayal. She had started dating someone new and was approaching the relationship with hard-earned wisdom about communication, boundaries, and the importance of not carrying past pain into new connections. Marcus also gave an interview, discussing his own journey. He talked about the guilt he had carried for 3 years and how Steve Harvey's words about forgiving himself had started a process of self-reflection and healing. He acknowledged that his affair had destroyed his marriage, but he was learning to accept that he could not change the past and needed to focus on being a better person moving forward. Marcus shared that he had not dated anyone since the separation, choosing instead to focus on his relationship with his children and his own personal growth. He had continued therapy, working through the issues that had contributed to his affair in the first place, including communication problems, midlife crisis feelings, and an inability to address conflict directly. 1 year after the episode aired, Steve Harvey invited the Torres family back for a follow-up segment. Angela and Marcus appeared together but sat separately, comfortable with their new dynamic as co-parents rather than spouses. Their 3 children sat between them, looking noticeably more relaxed than they had during the original taping. Steve asked them to reflect on what had changed in the year since their Family Feud appearance. Isabella spoke about how the divorce had actually brought peace to their family. The constant tension was gone, replaced by parents who were both working on becoming healthier individuals. Miguel shared that watching his parents finally make a real decision, rather than staying stuck in resentment, had taught him important lessons about honesty in relationships and the courage it takes to admit when something is not working. Sophia, the youngest, said simply that she was proud of both her parents for choosing their own healing over staying in a situation that was making everyone miserable. Angela spoke about forgiveness in a new way. She explained that she had not forgiven Marcus in the way she once thought she needed to. She had not reached a place where the affair did not matter or where trust was fully restored. But she had forgiven him in the sense of releasing him from her constant blame and anger. She had let go of the need to punish him forever and had found peace in acknowledging that people can make terrible mistakes without being terrible people. Marcus thanked Angela publicly for that gift of release. He said that being freed from the constant reminder of his worst mistake had allowed him to finally work on becoming the person he wanted to be rather than being defined forever by what he had done wrong. Steve Harvey listened to their updates and reflected on the original episode. "What happened on this stage a year ago was painful to witness," he said. "But sometimes pain is necessary for growth. You two were stuck in a pattern that was destroying you both. Neither of you could move forward because you were both holding on to the marriage with one hand and pushing each other away with the other." He continued, "What I'm most proud of is that you made a real choice. Not an easy choice, but a real one. And now you're both healing. Your children are healing, and that's what matters most." The follow-up segment included commentary from relationship experts about the challenges of recovering from infidelity. They emphasized that there is no one right answer about whether to stay or leave after betrayal. Some marriages can recover and even become stronger. Others cannot, and recognizing when a marriage is truly over is its own form of wisdom and courage. 2 years after the episode, the Torres family story was featured in a documentary about Family Feud's most impactful moments. The documentary explored how the show had become more than entertainment, sometimes serving as an unexpected catalyst for people to confront truths they had been avoiding. The documentary included updates showing Angela in a healthy new relationship, Marcus focusing on his career and his children, and the 3 Torres children thriving as adults with a more peaceful family dynamic. They all agreed that the Family Feud confrontation, while initially humiliating, had ultimately forced necessary change that none of them had been brave enough to initiate on their own. 3 years after the episode, Angela wrote an article for a major publication about her experience. She discussed the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, explaining that she had learned these were not the same thing. Forgiveness was about releasing anger and resentment for her own peace. Reconciliation was about rebuilding a relationship. She had achieved one without the other, and that was okay. The article resonated with millions of readers, particularly those who felt pressured to reconcile with people who had hurt them simply because they had forgiven them. Angela's message was clear. You can forgive someone and still choose not to have them in your life. You can release anger without restoring trust. You can move forward without going back. Marcus also contributed to the article, sharing his perspective on accountability and change. He wrote about the importance of accepting consequences for your actions, even when those consequences are permanent and painful. He emphasized that real remorse includes accepting that the person you hurt may never be able to move past what you did, and that demanding their forgiveness is just another form of selfishness. The Torres family story became a teaching tool in marriage counseling programs across the country. Therapists used it to help couples understand the difference between staying together because they want to versus staying together because they think they should. It illustrated that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and your partner is to acknowledge when a marriage cannot be saved and to part ways with as much dignity and grace as possible. Steve Harvey continued to reference the Torres family in his relationship advice, using their story to teach about the importance of making real decisions rather than staying stuck in limbo. He emphasized that marriage is not just about commitment, it is also about creating a healthy environment where both people can thrive. When that becomes impossible, staying together can be more harmful than separating. As this story reaches its conclusion, it is important to recognize that the Torres family's journey represents countless couples who face the aftermath of infidelity and must decide whether their marriage can survive the betrayal. Their story shows that there is no shame in trying to rebuild and no shame in ultimately deciding that rebuilding is not possible. Before you finish watching this video, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Share this video with anyone who is struggling with forgiveness, dealing with betrayal, or trying to decide whether to stay in or leave a troubled relationship. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on forgiveness and whether there are some betrayals that a marriage cannot survive. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that address real issues affecting real families. The lesson from Angela and Marcus Torres is both complex and liberating. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation. You can release anger without restoring a relationship. You can acknowledge someone's remorse while still choosing to protect yourself from further hurt. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is to admit that a marriage is over and to move forward separately rather than staying together in misery. This is what happens when unresolved pain gets exposed on a public stage. This is what happens when someone cares enough to stop the game and demand honesty. And this is what happens when two people finally face the truth that they have been avoiding for years. The Torres family will always remember the day their marriage imploded on Family Feud. But they will also remember it as the day they stopped pretending and started healing, even if that healing meant going their separate ways.